Dear viewers, you are watching Behind the Scene with Shahid Janjua, and I have privilege to sit with and interview Halifax MP Holly Lynch. Holly Lynch is a politician for the Labour Party. She was first elected as the Member of Parliament for Halifax in 2015 general election. She won the second time in 2007 general election with a clear majority of over 5,000 votes. She is the Shadow Minister for Flooding and Coastal Communities. Holly Lynch is the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Fair Trade and co-chair of the British Museum Group and Population Development and Reproductive Health Group. Lynch has also been a member of All-Party Parliamentary Group on Migration, Britain, Palestine, Labour Friends of Palestine and the Middle East, Art and Health, Kashmir, Policing and Rugby Union. Holly Lynch, I will start with a general question. How do you feel your day-to-day life as a local MP is going?
It's always incredibly busy, and I was only explaining this morning to somebody that it sometimes feels like a job that has two very different parts, your local work and then the work down in Westminster. So here in the parliamentary recess, it's great to be out and about, spending more time in your communities, because that's the stuff that really matters to me, and then you know what people want, expect from you when Parliament sits again in September and you go and take those experiences to Westminster. So always busy, plenty to do under a Conservative government as a Labour MP, but hopefully people feel it's going well.
And you are expecting first baby?
I am indeed, yes, so the end of September, so there will be a little bit of maternity leave for me at the end of this year, but of course I've got a fantastic team here in the office, so I very much hope that constituents will not see a big difference at all.
Holly, as you are aware about Islamophobia attack on Muslim women who wear hijab, they have risen since Boris Johnson compared them to letterbox. The Prime Minister Theresa May has demanded Boris Johnson apologizes for the offensive remarks. What would you say about this?
I think it's disgraceful, Boris's comments, and I think this is a pattern of behaviour that we've seen from Boris Johnson and sadly from other Conservative MPs as well. I think the Prime Minister is quite right to throw her whole weight behind an investigation now, to call on him to apologise. And unfortunately, I think we see time and time again Boris Johnson making comments where he enjoys being in the papers, and he's completely got no regard for whether this is a serious issue. Whatever he says, whatever gets him in the papers, I think he feels that that gives him a profile. I'm sorry, but this is not the right issue for him to make it about his leadership. Absolutely unforgivable comments. He has to apologise. He has to set the record straight, and we want to see much more responsible dialogue, words, engagement from all members of Parliament. But Boris Johnson has done this too many times now. He has to apologise and start to set the record straight.
What would you think the Tories should next in order to sort things out?
So as I mentioned, I think this is a pattern now of incredibly uneducated comments. I fear that some of our Conservative MPs just do not reflect today's diverse communities, that there's a lack of understanding, a lack of education there. They've got to go out, meet with people who experience the really negative consequences of when they make comments that they've not thought through. I want to see full investigations and consequences for those Conservative MPs who make these sorts of comments. Of course, within Labour MPs as well, we've always got to be very responsible about what we say, how we conduct ourselves. But I'm afraid we have seen a pattern of behaviour now, and we've seen that locally as well. There needs to be accountability and education that takes place amongst Conservative MPs, and then they use their words and their language much more responsibly in future.
Some MPs has demanded resignation from Boris Johnson. So, what is your demand from him?
I would certainly agree. I think he does need to reflect on how serious his comments were. And the really, really sad consequences are where, as you say, people then think it's acceptable to use that language, take it further, and you potentially see attacks, and where you see attacks on women in particular, I find that particularly despicable. I'd certainly like there to be now serious consequences for Boris Johnson if he's not prepared to reflect on his own actions, then the Prime Minister must take that action and do that for him.
Do you agree with the inquiry taking place in the Conservative Party?
Yes, I do, but I do think it's got to be broader than just Boris Johnson's comments. So I think that is a good step forward. I'm very disappointed that he himself has just not appreciated how serious and inappropriate his comments are. If he's not going to take that action, then I'm glad that there's going to be this inquiry. But as I say, I think there is a pattern emerging now, so that inquiry's got to be broader than just Boris Johnson's words and actions.
Now I would like to ask you a question about the foreign policy. What are your concerns on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia airstrike on a Yemeni school bus? And the newspaper has reported over 30 children have been killed in that specific incident.
And I think anybody who's seen those images or the video footage of those children who've been the victims of those airstrikes cannot have seen those without being deeply affected. There really must be an international pressure now on Saudi Arabia that those sorts of actions are absolutely unacceptable. There must be a serious regard for international humanitarian law, and those sorts of actions that inflict that sort of suffering on children and young people, there should be no place for that in the world. I think we do need to ask very serious questions about the sale of UK and British weapons to Saudi Arabia in the knowledge that there is a risk that they can be used in attacks like that. However, first and foremost, we understand that Saudi Arabia would get its weapons from elsewhere, so there must, first and foremost, as a priority, be international pressure that says it's unacceptable to use weapons in that way. Children should never be the victims of conflict, and so that must stop with immediate effect.
What was the British Parliament done? What has the British Parliament done or could do to resolve conflict of Kashmir between Pakistan and India?
Well, not enough is the short answer. I have been disappointed that in debates and in letters that I've written to this government time and time again, this government has taken a position that it is not its role to interfere or to mediate or take tougher action against both Pakistan and India, to bring them together to really now try and find a peaceful solution to the disputed region of Kashmir. But again, coming back to a human rights approach, I have been deeply distressed by the lack and disregard of a human rights-based approach to maintaining peace in Kashmir. The use of pellet guns, the use of violence, the use of torture to try and manage people, manage crowds in Kashmir has been something that I found deeply distressing and have tried to raise time and time again in Westminster with a number of my colleagues. But I'm just fearful that this government has not reflected on just how serious the situation is. We know it's one of the longest running conflicts in the world's history. I think sometimes for that reason it gets lost. It's not always on our news channels, in our media in the way that you would expect it to be. But that's why politicians must redouble their efforts to try and bring Pakistan and India to the negotiating table to make sure that there is self-determination for the people of Kashmir.
I'm sure you have done lots of work on Kashmir issue. Any further detail you want to share through the Apple TV to the Pakistani community and Kashmiri communities today?
Yeah, certainly, and we're always seeking to raise information in debates. We have had I think only just one debate in the main chamber whilst I've been an MP. So certainly sought that opportunity to raise these issues time and time again. But through the work of the All-Party Parliamentary Group, we held a day-long evidence session that was incredibly helpful, where we invited different guests, different representative communities to come and share their information about the situation on the ground in Kashmir. That was a really useful experience, and we're pulling together a report through that All-Party Parliamentary Group about what next steps should be and the ways, again, that we can raise the issue through Westminster, but encourage our government and our Foreign Secretary to really take this issue seriously. You mentioned that I also co-chair the Fair Trade All-Party Parliamentary Group. One of the things I've discussed locally is how can we bolster the economy in Kashmir and give people an economic and financial boost that will then support healthcare, support education. Through the Fair Trade APPG and working locally, that's one of the ways that we're exploring this. But that's something that we can do locally to try and support businesses in Kashmir. But what I really want to see is government taking this seriously, taking the issue to the United Nations so that we can try and do much more to bring peace and stability, human rights, but then long-term peace to Kashmir as well.
Kashmiri handicraft is the world famous art. Any suggestion for them to hold sort of displays in the UK?
Yeah, and it seems to be that, people might think this is something that's quite trivial, but actually just supporting businesses and best practice with businesses and the ways that we can then start to slowly grow the economy. Actually, fair trade is one of the ways that we can do that, and it's a way that we can do that locally. So we've been looking to discuss further with mosques, with our fair trade groups, how we can support that, how we can create a platform that people can buy and support fair trade. And we've got fair trade produce from Kashmir, but also other parts of the world like Palestine. It's a great way to have that conversation, to get things on the agenda, but support the economy there, and that we can play a local role here as well. So we're always looking for ways that we can find platforms to have that conversation, to find that produce, to sell it in a way that will have a benefit to both Kashmir and Palestine in the long run as well.
Holy Link, today I want to express the strongest condemnation for the acts of incitement of hate against the faith of billions of Muslims of the world and our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I have strong belief in freedom of expression as a journalist. It should be and must be guaranteed and protected when they are used for common justice, common purpose, and not to provoke or humiliate some other values and beliefs. Would you support the idea that has been floated establishing clear rules against blasphemy protected by the international law?
Yeah, and it's always finding that balance around freedom of speech, that everyone should be able to and protected to and have those freedoms to practice their own individual views, thoughts, religions, and you want to ensure a safe environment where people can do that.